Bible is full of fascinating stories, some of which have even been confirmed by science as true. While there are well-known figures and stories that many of us are familiar with, there are others that seem to have completely vanished from our collective memory. Gog and Magog. Gog, a person, and Magog, a land, are only mentioned twice in the Bible, but they seem to be really important. In Ezekiel 38, we're introduced to Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Eventually, Gog attacks Israel. Then, in Revelation 19:11 through 21:8, Gog and Magog are mentioned again. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and gather them for battle. The Nephilim. Genesis 6 tells us that the Nephilim were the offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men. Essentially a new kind of being. Some say the sons of God were angels. They are also described as giants in some Bible versions. But what happened to them? Remember the Great Flood and the story of Noah's Ark? It's believed that no creature outside of the ark survived the apocalyptic event, except maybe the Nephilim. Numbers 13:32-33 talks about a land that the Israelites explored, and it seems that these creatures lived there. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Some scholars believe there's an indirect reference to them again in Ezekiel 32:27, but it's just an interpretation. This is the farthest the story goes in the Bible. The talking donkey. Numbers 22:21-39 tells the story of Balaam, who was riding on a donkey when the animal stopped after seeing an angel in the road. Balaam struck the donkey twice to make it move, but without success. After the third time Balaam hit the donkey, God gave the donkey the ability to speak. They then have a conversation, but the key point is that nowhere in the Bible does it say that the donkey lost its ability to talk after that moment. Who was Bartholomew? Bartholomew was one of Jesus' 12 apostles. He was part of the inner circle of the Messiah, but other than his name, there's very little else about him in the Bible. Melchizedek. Melchizedek was both a priest and the king of Salem. He was such an important figure that even Abraham paid him tithes. But who is this man, really? Melchizedek is described in Hebrews 7 as a man without father or mother, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God. Could Melchizedek have been some sort of prototype for Jesus? In Psalm 110, God says to Jesus, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek," which highlights the importance of this biblical figure. The reason for his disappearance from the Holy Book, however, remains a mystery: the strange curse of Ham. Genesis 9:20-27 says that Noah once passed out drunk and naked in his tent. His son, Ham, called his brothers and then covered his father's body. When Noah woke up, he cursed Ham's descendants to become slaves. Who was Canaan, you ask? He was Ham's son and Noah's grandson. But what exactly did he do to deserve this curse? It's not very clear from what's written in the Bible. The sad aftermath of this curse is that it was cited by various cultures to justify slavery. Land of Nod. The story of Abel and Cain is one of the most well-known in the Bible. God prefers Abel's offering, Cain becomes jealous, and he kills his brother. So what happens to Cain? Well, God sends him to the land of Nod, where he starts a family and builds a city. But after that, there's no further mention of this mysterious land. Some scholars believe the word Nod was used metaphorically, as its origins mean to wander or exile. Essentially, it was God's way of sending Cain into exile. But again, this is just a theory. The fight. Genesis 32:22-32 describes an epic struggle between Jacob and a man who turns out to be God himself, until daybreak. God then strikes Jacob's hip, and he walks with a limp for the rest of his life. And another interesting detail mentioned in this Bible passage. That is why to this day the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. Wouldn't it be fun if there were more fighting stories like this in the Bible? Zipporah. Moses' wife Zipporah is mentioned 4 times in the Bible, but we really don't know much about who she was, other than the possibility that she was a Cushite, meaning she might have been African. Cush was a large area in Africa that included parts of modern-day Sudan and Ethiopia, and interracial marriage would have been quite significant back in that time. Though some scholars theorize that Zipporah was called a Cushite because she was strikingly beautiful and different. Witches. In biblical terms, witches are pretty much always seen as bad, right? Leviticus 19:31 says, "Do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritualists, for you will be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God." Pretty straightforward rule, right? However, King Saul of Israel consulted a witch who summoned the spirit of the judge prophet Samuel. And over in Galatians 5:19-21, witchcraft is condemned once again. Raising the dead. In the Old Testament, there are a few instances where people are raised from the dead. But this changes in the New Testament, where only Jesus Christ has the power to do that. Well, almost only Jesus. There's this one time, as described in Acts 20:7-12. The Apostle Paul had been preaching for hours, and a young man named Eutychus fell into a deep sleep. He then fell to the ground from the third story and was picked up dead. Luckily, Paul was there, and he brought him back to life. Just like that, no big deal. Chaos monsters or dinosaurs. In Job 40:14-24, God describes the behemoth as a huge, strong, and muscular creature. It has limbs like rods of iron and eats grass like an ox. Then in Job 41, God boasts about another similar creation, a fire-breathing sea monster called Leviathan. Could these two creatures have been dinosaurs? Wow, if you made it all the way to the end, you're the kind of person who loves digging deep. And honestly, this channel needs more folks like you. If this video made you think twice, sparked your curiosity, or even made you want to flip through a few Bible pages with fresh eyes, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. But don't just subscribe like it's another click. Join the kind of community that loves asking questions and respects the search for meaning. Now it's your turn. What did you think of these mysteries? Had you heard of any of them before? Or maybe you've got a story of your own, or a theory, or even a passage you've always wondered about. Share it in the comments. I read everything, and honestly, some of the best conversations start right there in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time when we dig into more of the Bible's untold secrets. Take care.